Borderlines every Friday at 4 p.m. on Nigeria Info 99.3. As she dissects the biggest global events and their impact on world peace.
Those who are not familiar with Israel or the war itself would not know much about the group, breaking the silence.
No spin, no propaganda, just deep insights and fearless conversations on the geopolitics shaping our world.
People who will call and start telling you about the Bible prophecy about America and everything. See, not in the Bible. There's some people who, yes, they share the ideology of, yes, we and these people, we are equal, but they can't speak up.
Borderlines on Nigeria Info every Friday at 4 p.m. The world is changing. Don't just watch, understand it. Nigeria Info. Let's talk.
And it's a good afternoon. Welcome to Borderlines, the only show that takes you beyond borders. My name is Ireti Bakare-Yusuf. Ireti, pronounced or spelled with an I, pronounced as an E. Ireti. Right. So, in what has become the signature chaos of Donald Trump's White House drama for trauma reality show, anyone with the expectations for civility, calm, and respectable diplomacy was very quickly awoken from their slumber of naivety this week. As if the Zelensky experience was not enough, the most important house and office of the American political theater disabused us of all our senses yet again this week with what can only be described as absurd and, most importantly, disrespectful. Yet the special guest of honor, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, he did his best under possibly the most difficult live experience he had ever been central to on foreign land. So this week, we're going beyond borders. We're doing a skip, a hop, and a scotch to South Africa, to our brethren over there, as we say, down south. South Africa, the country that is nicknamed the Rainbow Country. After decades of colonialism and brutal apartheid, in 1994, the world applauded and witnessed the country's transformation from apartheid rule to the government of majority. The ANC's victory at the ballot box made many promises, especially to the black majority of the country who, up until then, had been wholly disenfranchised. One of those promises was economic reform. However, today, some groups that make up the rainbow say, and they have accused the government of South Africa of what some called reverse apartheid. Donald Trump calls it white genocide. So joining me today is Kallie Kriel. I don't know if I've pronounced his name right. He's the CEO of AfriForum, and Lwazi Somya, International Relations Analyst. Gentlemen, welcome.
Good evening to you, ma'am. Great speaking to you. Hello, Lwazi.
Yes, this is Nigeria. Oh, yes. You know each other, do you?
No, I just saw his name here on the screen.
And you know he's a brethren. Yes, you're both South African.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So let's start, because even though it seems like we have an hour, it goes incredibly fast on this show. Kallie, what is AfriForum? In a minute, can you just tell us what AfriForum is and what it stands for?
Yes, we're a civil rights organization that was formed in the Afrikaner community when a lot of Afrikaners left the country or just withdrew themselves from the debate in the country. And we said we should act as citizens and participate. But the parts we get known for is actually only 20% of our activities. That is more the watchdog role, is 20%. 80% is that we believe in self-reliant communities and also institutions. So we work in towns, fix roads, have our own neighborhood watches, test water, and do a lot of community projects, which is the core of what we are doing. But we also play a role as a watchdog. And I think I'm here tonight in our role as a watchdog.
Okay. Watchdog, what are you watching?
Well, I think the issues is it's human and civil rights that we are looking at, but also minority rights. But most of the issues we take on are broader issues. We set up a private prosecution unit with Kriel that looks where the criminal justice system fails us. Probably 95% of the people he assists are black people. Then, of course, corruption is something we are taking on. But then also with regard to language rights and also when it comes to Afrikaans. And I think one thing that probably led also to the dispute with the US or from our side is actually the biggest alienation came when the ANC-led government signed an act that targets Afrikaans schools. And because we don't have traditional communities where our language and culture can flourish, that would happen. Schools play a central role. And I think that was the big thing to say, that our cultural existence was put under threat with that attack on the schools. And then, of course, the whole thing escalated from them because we negotiated with the president's representatives. Afterwards, he just said he did not give a mandate for that. And in that sense, that was the same experience we had. We wrote to the president with regard to the Expropriation Act. He did not answer our letter. We have written to them to ask the president to denounce the Kill the Boer chant. He did not even answer that letter. We just heard his spokesperson in the media saying, well, he's not going to engage with us.
Okay.
So those are the kind of frustrations which, even before we went to the US, we also wrote to him. He ignored it again. And then he comes now on television or in parliament saying, you know what, we should get South African solutions for South African problems. We agree. But if he's not going to answer our letters or engage with us, then we have to get all the help we can, wherever it's available.
Okay, so you mentioned the United States. You have just said you have lobbied the United States primarily to do with the Land Reform Act, which you've just mentioned. Appropriation. What is the primary problem with that? Because if we go back, and Lwazi, I'll be coming to you soon, but I understand that we only have Kallie for 30 minutes or so. Let me come. I need to address this. So, if we go back to the end of apartheid, as you all know, apartheid disenfranchised the majority, which were the blacks. Okay, the minority, which were the white South Africans, actually owned 70, 80, 90% of the land back then. The ANC comes in, the majority rule comes in, and they say, okay, we will ensure economic reform, equality and equity for everybody. Right now, as we are, till today, we still have a vast majority land that is belonging to white South Africans, white farmers. So why do you have a problem, especially as you say, you're about civil rights and everything? Why is there a problem? Why does AfriForum have a problem with the expropriation? Well,
we have
or the Land Reform Act, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have a problem with land reform. We have a problem with this Expropriation Act. But let me just say, in terms of statistics, the 70% figure is with regard to only the land used for commercial farming, not land commercial farming could be done. So if you look at the total area of the country, the whites have about 22% of the land. But of course, there is inequality. So we are all in favor of the restitution program. There's legislation in that regard, and that program has been running for a number of years, but it has failed. So let me not be biased. Let me quote from a report by former President Kgalema Motlanthe that did a high-level review with a team on the land reform process. And he said it fails because of corruption in government, because of a lack of capacity or bad management that there was, farms being given to people with political connections, more than 4,000 farms that was not transferred to people. It's actually the state took the land for them. They lease it out to some people, then 90% of that fails. And the reason it fails is not because there's black people getting a land, it's because the black people don't get title deeds. So they can't get a loan for the input costs. So government's own failure has led to what we've seen. But of course, they don't want to take responsibility for their own failure. And what they then do is to try and say, well, you know, the legal methods we have is not working. It's not working. There's nothing wrong with the legal methods. Now they've taken this act. And the problem we have, I'm not a landowner, but it will be devastating for me as well. And the reason I'm saying so, if you look at section 12.3 of the Act, it says there can be expropriation with no compensation. And it's open-ended because the reasons given there is open-ended in a sense. It says including but not limited to. And the current Deputy President, Bashatile, said expropriation with no compensation is the same as expropriation without compensation. Why are we so strongly against this? Because we've seen the result of that policy. We just across our border in Zimbabwe, that policy was said we want to give, with a good intention, we want to give land to black people. That was the public argument with regard to that. But if you disrespect property rights, and it's not if we like the argument or not, reality shows, then capital flees. What happens when capital flees? We have an unemployment rate in Zimbabwe now of 90%. We had hyperinflation, that Zimbabwe's own currency. Okay. They had to change it with the US dollar. So that would be a terrible effect, even on the people that are yearning for land, would be terribly negatively affected. Okay. So we are loyal when we fight against that, and we are in support of land restitution, and we must fix that process.
Okay. Lwazi, if I may come to you. You've heard everything that Carl has said. What then is the problem? Do you agree that, you know, the issue AfriForum only has an issue with the failure of government, of the ANC government, due to accusations, as many say, of corruption, etc.? Or is it something else?
Well, it's a combination of multiple things. And part and parcel of that is not necessarily the land reform project failing on the basis that there wasn't an asset program made. So, for example, the willing buyer, willing seller program that was run by government in the early years of our democracy, where they offered to buy property from white farmers at above market rates and at market rates. That failed on the basis that white farmers refused to sell the property to the government. The secondary aspect of it is on the basis that around 72% of farming land is still owned by white people in South Africa, whilst white people only constitute 7.3% of the population. Added on top of that, the vast inequalities that exist within South Africa and the poverty and unemployment that's perpetuated by a system that is stuck within a structured apartheid system. Therefore, economically, the current distribution of land within South Africa is still structured around the colonial apartheid lines. And people like Kriel want to sustain that distribution of land on the basis that it's just their privilege. For example, there's been no expropriation of land without compensation in South Africa since our dawn of our democracy. And yes, the new Expropriation Act does make provisions for the expropriation land at no compensation. However, a key aspect Kallie forgets to make is that this follows a judicial process that the judges and various processes are involved in. And therefore, this is not an arbitrary land grab as we've seen in Zimbabwe. The hyperinflation that is highlighting is also credited towards the monetary policy of the Zimbabwean government, where they just simply printed money instead of adhering to sound monetary policy. And therefore, Kriel conflates the notion of what the land grabs in Zimbabwe actually did in terms of what the Zimbabwean government did at the time in terms of the land grabs there, and the current processes which are sound within our constitution. Where Kriel is having a problem with is, number one, AfriForum has failed to test this legislation up and win in court concerning this legislation. Number two, AfriForum has failed to garner sufficient more broad-based support for their opposition to the legislation. And number three, even within Afrikaner circles, AfriForum is being rejected by some Afrikaner groupings, saying that they do not represent their interest. And therefore, we should be very conscious when we deal with people like Kriel. For example, when they went to the United States, they went around this rumor around a white genocide with Tucker Carlson, and these rumors were perpetuated and spread into the White House. This is why you saw yesterday the situation where Donald Trump played a video and snippets out of a documentary made by Kallie and AfriForum, and therefore bringing South Africa's national sovereignty in threat. So people like Kallie are very nostalgic about a bygone age where they do not want to live with Black people in this country and build a united and diverse society. Instead, they want to create conclaves of Afrikaner interests and Afrikaner apartheid mentality and live segregated from a broader democratic nation that is South Africa.
Okay, there's a lot of accusations there. I hope, Kallie, I hope you will be able to stay for as long as we booked you for, because I'm hearing that you said you have to go. So I've got to come back to you then. If there is... Okay, go ahead very quickly.
Yes, I've not heard so many lies told in so short a time. The fact is, those institutions that said we spread white genocide, we took them to the press ombudsman in South Africa, and they were found guilty and they had to apologize to us. The fact that there are Afrikaner groupies opposed to us, I don't know about them. It might be institutions that aren't Afrikaner groups. We represent, in the solidarity movement, 600,000 families. If you take that, it's more than half of the Afrikaner population. So we have firm support. The video played by Donald Trump, that's another lie. Go and watch our documentary. That video is not, it's a video that was made by somebody else. But you think... But
if I may interrupt you though, but you did say, I do have a quote from you, if I can find it, where you said that the video that Donald Trump showed were part of some of your footages. You did say that.
Yes, no, we said some of the what was in that video, some of the inputs we have on our video. Okay, if you're going to...
No, I'm just saying, no. I just needed to correct that. You did say that in Bloomberg.
Everybody can go with, is Donald Trump right about South Africa? Go and watch that video and you watch the one. It's two different videos. I think News 24 now said it's somebody on Twitter that made that video in that regard. The fact is, we are sitting here in South Africa. There are only two categories of crime that people openly promote in South Africa. The one is kill the boer, kill the farmer. And if you now take a stance against that, that's not longing for apartheid. That's longing for a situation where my children don't have to be here, they have to be killed. The other things where people are propagating violence are against Nigerians with xenophobic attacks. But nobody would say, you know what, or they would say, no, but this is only part of normal violence. The xenophobia is not normal violence. Attacks on farms is not normal violence. So if people want to accuse us of longing for the past because we don't want to allow somebody to chant that we should be killed on an ethnic basis, and that's a problem in South Africa. That's why we also have xenophobia, because you have this kind of denialism that we've just heard, where people think it's fine that you propagate violence against ethnic communities or foreigners. And that is the problem. People try to downplay these serious issues.
Okay.
And that is why we are very upset about what is happening in the country. In terms of land reform, we are the Afrikaner organization. These people that criticize us, we have joint agricultural projects with various traditional communities that we have agreements with, the Barlong Buseleka community, the Amabele community.
If I may interrupt you because of time, in the interest of time, I found the quote. The quote was, we've used a lot of the footage in some of our videos, referring to the video that Donald Trump showed to President Ramaphosa. You said, you said, I think it's the White House's own compilation of video material that we've also used. That's what you said. But coming back to it, so there's a lot to unpack here, which is why I do hope you can stay, even though, of course, 1 hour is never nearly enough to actually talk about this. You talk about the good work that you do, but you also have to accept that right now your group AfriForum lobbied the Trump administration in the first term through John Bolton. Since then, you also then lobbied the Trump administration now. Right? You also said you went to the White House. You know, it's all over the press. You went to the White House. Now, when a foreign president is accusing your country, the country you say you love, of genocide, knowing full well that it isn't true, why hasn't AfriForum issued a statement to say we reject the allegations and, you know, the staining of genocide against our country, South Africa? Why hasn't AfriForum? I'll come to you, Lwazi, if I may just finish, because I'm conscious of time. Yeah.
Yes, I have to leave just after this, but let me just say it quickly. The fact is, we've never used the term, and we've said publicly we don't use the term. If one wants to look at why does President Trump say so, then you have to look at US legislation. What is his basis for saying that?
Oh, no, but no. I must come back. This is not to do with the US. I'm talking about you, Kallie Kriel, a South African. Right? Let's forget what the US Constitution says, because that doesn't apply.
You say we need to reject what he says, but then we have to look on. Does he have grounds according to his own legislation to say that?
But should you care whether he has grounds? Should you care? Should you care? Yes, if Nigeria, if somebody calls, if a foreign country, okay, you know the amount of falsehoods that's said about Nigeria. We Nigerians are quick to actually condemn it. Any Nigerian ambassador in any country will condemn it. We don't care what the legislation says or what the constitution says. And I'm saying you shouldn't care. You, Kallie Kriel, the CEO of AfriForum, shouldn't care about what the constitution or what President Trump is translating. You should care about how your country is being labeled, surely.
Well, there's a reason that people can label us for that, because in our country we have genocidal chants, kill the boer, kill the farmer. Okay. We have a president that refuses to condemn it. We wrote a letter to him asking him to condemn it. He did not answer us. All we heard is his spokesperson saying he will not engage us. We wrote to them asking that it be made a priority crime. Not that we believe this is a special crime, but there are many other priority crimes, rightfully so. The crime against women and children is a priority crime. Gang violence is a priority crime. Even rhino poaching is a priority crime. And what that means is a specific crime is identified that user needs a specific strategy. And they also refuse that. It's the only category of crime that is celebrated on X in South Africa, and you can go and look at that. If a farmer is murdered, there's celebration. So that's our focus. Okay. But nobody that criticizes President Trump, made it clear we don't speak about white genocide. These issues are the ones that trouble us. But, it actually shows the real problem that people would rather now go into that debate than looking at what is happening. People are being tortured, and a blowtorch being used, electric drill being used, boiling water being used, and those are the issues. But we have this farm murder and nihilism, and if these media institutions just spend so much time on the real issues of farm murders rather than spending all their time on trying to debunk something that the President Trump says,
okay,
well, then it would be great.
Okay, if I just could give you one quick quote. The Institute for Security Studies in Pretoria says, and I'll quote, "There is no credible evidence that attacks against white farmers are largely driven by criminal intent or greed." That's a quote from the Institute of. I really do wish you didn't have to go, because now I have to go to Lwazi. Otherwise, I'm not giving equal talking time. Do please stay with us a little bit. Lwazi, I'd like to come to you. Kill the Boer. Where does that come from? Kill the Boer. And really, let's talk about this. Is it okay for somebody to be chanting "Kill the Boer"? What is the origin of that chant? Tell us.
So there's a historic context behind the song, and it was behind the anti-apartheid struggle against white settler colonialism. And the time, the enemy was the Afrikaner-led government under the National Party. And therefore, for Black people within South Africa, that song became a galvanizing song that representing a fight for our freedom and against oppression. And unfortunately, some political parties still use this song. But to bring into context Kriel's claim, right, around the mass murder of white farmers. So South Africa has a population of white people around 7.3% of the general 66 million people of South Africa. In the last financial year alone, white people constituted around less than 1% of the 20,000 murders constituted in South Africa. Less than 1%, meaning that white people experience contact crime less than the general population in South Africa, meaning that they're the safest in South Africa. On farm murders alone, there were 225 farm-related incidences and contact crimes over the last 4 years, in fact. 225 over the last 4 years. 135 of those crimes were dwellers and employees, meaning Black people. The vast majority of attacks and violence are meted out against farm workers and Black people, and only 53 of those are actual farmers. So this notion that white people are targeted as an individual grouping surely shows there's a illusion of grandeur that is manifesting within AfriForum, thinking that they are allowed to not experience the holistic experience of South Africa, and they need to be shielded as a special grouping, whilst the vast majority of South Africans live under a situation where there's perpetual violence. So AfriForum, as groupings like AfriForum, as they continue to spread misinformation and they continue to scapegoat other people with their actions, we'll continue to have a situation where misinformation is replicated to suit a particular voice within the geopolitical world. And as we see during the Donald Trump administration, AfriForum's narrative squarely fits in within this entire notion of replacement theory by white people, and especially white supremacist nationalists. And therefore, AfriForum taking these aspects concerning a loud democracy and portraying them as if they are targeted and attacked by the Black majority of this country, solely seeks to solidify white superiorist mentality and white superiorist views that white people are being targeted within the international context, and that South Africa becomes a case study. Because South Africa, in its approach towards diversity and equality, has become the antithesis towards this white superiority, especially white male chauvinistic patriarchal view of what societies are supposed to be like. And therefore, we should be very conscious of when engaging with people like Kriel and how they mix their messages and they seek to undermine African democracies to uplift their own cult and clans within the African continent. We should be very, very, very careful in how we perceive these, as they have very bad national security and regional security implications to them.
Okay, so unfortunately, Kriel has left us. I believe, yeah, Mr. Kriel has left us. That's rather unfortunate. So let's continue with the conversation. Now, for AfriForum, it's really a case of, okay, if you're going to do land reforms, why not bring us into this discussion? Why not consider the fact that generations of Africans have actually lived on that farm, earned their living, toiled the soil, etc.? Why take the land away, even if it's going to be paid for, without a discussion?
The problem is that there was a discussion. This Expropriation Act took 6 years to pass through Parliament, as there were multiple public engagements, court processes, and even discussions amongst the people, communities, farming communities, and even throughout the entire country. And therefore, it was even taken to the Constitutional Court for testing, and it met constitutional muster. So Kallie, having lost out on that debate, is now fleeing to the United States to go beg Donald Trump to intervene in South Africa because they lost a debate of securing white privilege within South Africa. And therefore, when we look at what has happened in the creation of this legislation, there was a realization that white South Africans were unwilling to sell land or redistribute major parts of their land within South Africa. And part and parcel of that, it has resulted in many communities that were working their land for many generations too, to continue and be perpetually dispossessed of their land, resulting in them living in poverty and squalor, and perpetuating a situation where Black people within South Africa are regarded as second-rate citizens. And therefore, in this instance, Kriel, wanting a special dispensation concerning his constituents, wants a situation where we replicate a special dispensation for white people, and therefore not them in being infused to the entire experience of being a South African and experiencing how it feels like to be integrating and try to create jobs, not only jobs, but also helping Black people, upskill them, assist them in the creation of more jobs. Kallie highlights 3 communities that he works with, and those are in communities where there are large Afrikaner settlements, and these are very few Black farmers. However, he fails to mention that in the Eastern Cape, where a lot of Black farmers reside, AfriForum has done nothing, where most of the farm murders perpetrated against Black people are actually happening. And therefore, in their iterations around the specific targeting of a white race within South Africa, and also around the argument that there's a targeting of farmers, he negates that there are Black farmers that are being targeted. So we're not going to try and normalize the situation of crime in South Africa. No, it's gotten out of hand. And therefore, government needs to do something about it. But I take exception when this particular minority group perceives themselves as the ultimate victim of a situation where most people in South Africa are encountering on a day-to-day basis. And therefore, we should refuse them becoming the superioristic race among South Africans that should be protected at all costs, whilst we do not address the fundamental issues that result in crimes in South Africa, and that's poverty and unemployment and inequality itself.
Okay, so let's talk about the EFF element. Is Julius Malema a positive element in this whole debate, given especially that I think it was the EFF that actually tabled the motion for the land reforms initially? And given that, Julius Malema, former ANC youth wing, now become, if you like, communist radical, he speaks apparently for the poor. I'm just trying to, going by the quotes that's out there. And he is the one that, it was his video, albeit an old video, that Donald Trump played, where he's saying, kill the Boer. As you said, it's an old, march, ANC march from days of apartheid days. How positive or negative is the Julius Malema EFF element in all of this? I'm going to give you 2 minutes because we've still got questions to go. And the time is running out.
So there are 2 things, right? Julius Malema factor is both a positive and a negative. Negative in the fact of the chanting of kill the Boer, kill the farmer, however positive in the fact that they raise priority and urgency towards the issue of land reform within South Africa, which is a dire need. This situation of land reform has been a conversation since the 1990s upon the dawn of our democracy. There have been various mechanisms the government has tried. There have been various programs and even policies that the government has tried. But this, in this instance, is a very, very important piece of legislation that gives government and institutions means towards engaging towards appropriate land reform within South Africa. And if we do not do this, we'll perpetuate the current land injustice that's happening within South Africa.
But yet, government continues to let down the majority. You have high unemployment, which has led to xenophobia, which of course reimagines and if awakens the trauma of apartheid days. I mean, if I may be blunt, the ANC, what level of failure have they been? The ANC government.
You have to look at it holistically and as a country. If you look at access to electricity since 1994, access to schooling, housing, issues around industrialization and development, we've had rapid growth within the country concerning that. However, the lingering issue within South Africa is a growing youth population and an economy that's not growing fast enough to create jobs for the people. And therefore, there's this disillusionment with the state because the state is unable to generate jobs that we've seen in a lot of African countries that a lot of people are feeling disillusioned about. So we have to take it within that context. And therefore, issues such as load shedding with the electricity cuts off intermittently within South Africa, issues such as infrastructure backlogs, issues such as the delivery of textbooks in some areas, and issues such as water. These are all problems within South Africa. However, the crisis that emerges now is of a society that's very disillusioned with the state, and therefore they look out for those who are often marginalized. And that's often immigrant communities and also LGBTI queer people within South Africa. So these marginalized communities are at the receiving end, whilst white people within South Africa that AfriForum is fighting for are the most protected people within our nation. As I showed you with the murder statistics, whilst white people constitute 7% of the population, they are at the receiving end of less than 1% of the murder rates within South Africa. So it's in this instance that we have to take this within this context, and therefore we need to question the South African government on what are we doing to deal with this issue of unemployment? What are we doing to deal with issues around inequality? And then what are we doing because the population currently is very land hungry? What are we doing concerning land distribution? And this is the area that AfriForum feels they are being targeted on.
And this is where this is the question that we have to put to President Ramaphosa. Indeed, this is the question we have to put to the ANC government, who have been in power since 94, right? 30 years, I don't know how old you are, but 30 years, that's a whole generation that never knew apartheid, that only knows this government, this black majority government, who have not been served. They have not seen the dividends of this black majority government. So we do have to put that on the back of the ANC, do we not?
So, yes, as the government that has been in charge for 30 years, yes. However, we have to look at how do you now redress over 350 years of settler colonialism and apartheid within a space of 30 years. It is a very, very difficult task to do. And therefore, in order for us to redress those 350 years of settler colonialism and apartheid, one needs very radical legislation that fundamentally changes the material conditions and the status quo of the societal structures. That's what AfriForum is fighting against. And therefore, we need to address these issues and prevent organizations such as AfriForum from undermining national sovereignty, undermining South African democracy, and undermining the will of the vast majority through going to the United States and wanting the United States to usurp a South African government in one means or another. Fortunately, Cyril Ramaphosa has friends in high places and they was able to garner a meeting with President Trump, even though there was a lot of drama in that meeting. But there are a number of outcomes that we saw coming from the meeting. Number one, they've managed to reset the bilateral relationship between the United States and South Africa. Number two, they've able to initiate discussions around a comprehensive trade and investment deal between South Africa and the United States. And number three, they're able to be pushed back against the misinformation and disinformation about South Africa and the Expropriation Act. And part and parcel of this.
Go on. I'll let you round up because the time is going and I need to open up the lines. I'm getting calls coming in already.
Yeah, part and parcel of this is addressing the fundamental nature of South Africa's economy and also fixing the diplomatic relations with the United States. As South Africa and the United States have had a long relationship even during the days of apartheid as the ANC first sought help from the United States and then went to the Soviet Union after being rejected by the United States. So there has been this long relationship. And I think Donald Trump, having heard the team in Washington, it seems to want to engage with South Africa as he domestically wants to create a trade deal to cover up the tariff issues.
Right. So you can call now. We've only got, 10 minutes. Yeah, I've only got 10 minutes with Lwazi, unfortunately. So you can only call 30 seconds. Be clear with your question or comment. No long, no two questions. 0201 277 0993 0201 465 7190. WhatsApp 0809 597 5805. And just as I guessed, the lines have gone already. Hello.
It's okay. Good evening, ma.
Good evening.
It's Koboko. I greet you as your guest.
Yes, go ahead,
My question
Koboko.
to your guest is who is killing the farmers? Who is taking the land? And who is celebrating? And who is targeting? So let him explain to us. And
Okay.
why is it that
You get one question, Koboko, one question. Everybody gets one question. We don't have time. His question was, who is killing the farmers and who is celebrating? Okay, I was just about to answer that call. Oh, there we go. 1 second. Just write that down, Lwazi. Hello.
Good evening, Sisiogi.
Good evening.
It's Emmanuel I'm speaking to you.
Go ahead, Emmanuel.
My question is an insane question. Let's assume Julius Malema, was the president of South Africa meeting Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
How would that meeting have looked like?
Okay. Thank you. So, even Lwazi is laughing. That would have been an interesting drama. I have a message here on WhatsApp. And honestly, you guys can't be sending me long messages. I need you to keep it very, very short. I personally think that my questions are, are you only going to get one? Why is Donald Trump so much concerned about the lives of the white South African but comfortable with the killings going on in the Gaza area? That is from, you didn't put your name. I can't ask the rest of your question. And also, I want to ask your opinion. Question for you, Lwazi. Another question for you is your opinion on is it 57, 59 so-called South African refugees? That was why are they allowed when the Trump administration has put a stop, literally a stop to taking refugees from any other country? I'm going to give you 2 minutes because the line, you've got several questions. I'm sure you can do it in 2 minutes. The lines are going and we only have 4 minutes left.
Okay, let me start off why the white Afrikaners. It's to satisfy a domestic white racist base within the United States, and to portray them as Donald Trump is protecting all white people across the world, and therefore I'm willing to protect these ones. And who's killing the farmers? Farmers in South Africa are part of are victims of general crime within South Africa, especially murder. However, the AfriForum is elevating this issue as if they want to be special protection from the South African government. And no one is celebrating the murder of farmers in South Africa, especially the majority of farmers being killed are actually black farmers within South Africa, not these white farmers AfriForum claim to be protecting. And therefore, we shouldn't celebrate the killing of these people. And the question of Julius Malema, let's leave it to conspiracy theories and our imagination.
I think Emmanuel has quite a wild imagination. I have another one here before I let you go. Let me see. It's long. You people have to stop this. My listeners are my co-host and they do. Gosh, it's long. It's long. The story of white South African farmers was amplified in certain U.S. media outlets aligned with Trump. Meanwhile, the Gaza conflict is often presented in a polarized way and taking a strong stance on Palestinian suffering risks entangling a leader in a highly charged debate. That's AA from Aso Drive in Abuja. So here's the thing. Some would suggest that, or some have suggested, not would suggest, some have suggested that the reason President Trump came on so incredibly aggressive at South Africa, all the allegations weren't threatening to expel the ambassador, is to do with the case at the ICJ. Would you agree?
Yes, that's partly true, as a Zionist lobby was within Donald Trump's ambit, and therefore South Africa became a special target. But there are also other aspects between the what was failing within the bilateral relationship. There were allegations by Ruben Bridgerty last year that South Africa was shipping out arms to Russia. There were allegations that South Africa was colluding with Iran. And these were all failing diplomatic issues that the bilateral relationship with South Africa and the United States had even before the beginning of the Donald Trump administration. However, the Donald Trump administration then took up this issue of the Afrikaners and added it to the pot of the toxic nature of the bilateral relationship between South Africa and the United States. So what you see now as South Africa engages with the United States is the resetting of that bilateral relationship. But South Africa is not going to give up its case on the ICJ, and South Africa will not give up its protection and its non-aligned position in the international community.
So here's the thing. One of the things that I came through, I stumbled upon doing my research, my preparation for this interview, is that AfriForum is being charged to court in South Africa for treason because they took a domestic issue to a foreign country. Tell us a little bit about that, if you can do that in like 30 seconds. And I'll try and fit in one more call, two more, if possible. I do my best.
Yeah. So there were South African citizens that laid charges against AfriForum for treason, especially concerning their work in the United States of undermining South Africa's territorial integrity and sovereignty by going to the United States and spreading false information about the country. And during the time where the allegations were made, South Africa's rand tanked, hampering the economic livelihoods of people within South Africa. So AfriForum's actions, now it will be tested before the courts because the case is still to be heard, and therefore the charges themselves are not brought before by the government, but everyday citizens that are pissed off at AfriForum for their actions and how they've conducted themselves, undermining South Africa's national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
So is the term, like I said, I will pick up one call. I will try and sneak it in because Lwazi is still here and I've got like 3.5 minutes, but you've got to be quick. 020127709993, 020146579190. So let me ask you, is the term kill the bird now illegal in South Africa, or is it still, because I think I read that it was the courts didn't rule against it, or am I wrong? Or did I read wrong? Hold on to that. Let me answer this and then you can answer both together. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, good afternoon. Turn off your radio very quickly.
Yeah, good afternoon, Cecilia.
Good afternoon.
Emeka is my name from Satellite Town.
Go ahead, Emeka.
My question is beyond inequality and maybe unemployment in South Africa, don't you think it is post-apartheid hangover, or let's say apartheid hangover?
Thank you.
Is responsible for the xenophobic attacks and the killings that is taking hold in South Africa?
Thank you. Right, so I think you've mentioned it, but I'll put it to you again. Post-apartheid South Africa is what's leading to the xenophobia. Hold on 1 second. Hello?
Hello?
Turn off your radio, please. Your name, where you're calling from, and your question.
I'm Pastor, but I'm mostly from Surulere.
Go ahead, Pastor.
What I want to ask your guest is that now the independence or the republic they got through the negotiation of Mandela, it has not worked. Has it worked?
Okay, good question. Right, has it worked? There you go. So you've got a minute.
I didn't hear the previous question.
He said the independence, that you got from Mandela, has it worked? So basically, he's talking about the majority rule, the handover from apartheid,
Yeah. So the Kill the Bull, Kill the Farmer song is not illegal in South Africa, as the court has ruled. It is part of our national legacy of freedom and heritage. And as long as people do not utilize a song and people enact the actions of the songs upon others, therefore there's no issue. So when hate speech becomes criminal is when people enact the hate speech within the South African context, and therefore the song itself is not criminalized. Well, South Africa still has a legacy of apartheid, and it's manifested through the inequality, unemployment, and general poverty within our nation, as it still has a black woman face to it. So the current system, even though there have been reforms and advances made in the democratic period, that a lot of people, including myself, has benefited from through education, being able to get access to education, schooling, housing, etc., that the South African government and the South African population at large gets. However, there are still those challenges of development, industrialization, and actually getting people into jobs that are facilitating a process which people meet out their frustrations on those most vulnerable. In some instances, being foreign nationals, and in being told instances are LGBTI community members with South African LGBTI community members. So it is always a situation where they target the most vulnerable within the society, and therefore we must be very conscious of that and how South Africa now deals with these issues around the inequality and poverty.
Thank you very much, Lwazi. Somya, thank you so much. We've got to get you back because there's a lot to say on South Africa. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your country with us today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
More conversation, more talk, more right after this.
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.